Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hello everyone, I'm Bill Dodden for Troy Moeling this week, and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. We've got a great show in store for you today, but first we have some breaking news that we'd like to share with you. The team here at Market Journal is very excited to announce the arrival of our latest junior producer. Market Journal host Troy Moeling and his wife Caitlin welcomed their new baby boy Shiloh Henry Moeling into the world on April 21st. Weighing in at 5 pounds 9 ounces, after a short stay in the hospital, the Moeling family is now home resting comfortably. We're all very excited to officially meet young Shiloh and want to wish a heartfelt congratulations to both Troy and Caitlin. First up in the headlines today, though, since the inception of the Gudmundsen Sandhills Laboratory, or GSL for short, research ranging from animal to entomology at this facility has resulted in advances in range livestock nutrition, beef cattle production, grazing systems, and low-cost cattle management, just to name a few accomplishments. With the integration of ranch economics applied to many facets of research performed at the laboratory, one elected official has taken some time to get familiarized with the site. Earlier this month, Congressman Don Bacon made a visit to the Gudmundsen Sandhills Laboratory to visit with producers and researchers about agricultural policy issues and get some insight into the research happening in the Sandhills. Bacon represents Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District, which covers Douglas and Sarpy counties. Since being elected in 2017, Bacon has been assigned to the Committee on Armed Services as well as Committee on Agriculture. Congressman Bacon told us how imperative research like that conducted at GSL is to his work within the Committee on Agriculture.
Well, I've been the lead proponent for vaccine research. We have a tremendous threat with African swine fever, and we have to put a lot of money into research and find a cure, because if that comes to America, we're going to be in trouble. And we can get ahead of that through good research. We're doing that right now. I was the lead proponent for the foot and mouth disease vaccine bank, which is sort of an insurance policy. Right now we have FMD outbreaks in Africa. If we had one here and we didn't plan right, it could shut down our livestock trade for 5 years. So those are the things I've been involved with on the livestock subcommittee, and it's tied to research primarily. But so we want to preserve our livestock industry. Nebraska's a lead exporter, #1 exporter in beef. We're like #5 or so in pork, and we want to preserve that. Livelihoods, family income is very much contingent on the success of our livestock industry.
Despite Nebraska legislators providing some property tax relief in last year's legislative session, while visiting with local producers, Bacon told me one of the most frequent complaints he gets from our agricultural producers in Nebraska is still the issue of property tax in the state.
And it's typically the #1 issue I hear of when I talk to ranchers and farmers. And I just make a case in point. I was talking to a rancher in Wyoming. I was visiting an Air Force base, and I was eating dinner with the mayor out there down at Cheyenne and some of the business leaders. And I was told by one of these guys that he was paying 3 times the property tax in Nebraska than he was paying in Wyoming. I hear the same thing in South Dakota. How do our ranchers compete when we're paying 3 times the higher property tax? It's not right. So we have to keep chipping away at this. I know the governor has been working at it, but frankly, at the state level, there's such a small share of property tax. It's our counties, our school boards that make up the lion's share of the property tax. And I think I've looked at some different ideas on how we can make bigger reductions in our property tax. So everybody wants to reduce, but then when you look at areas you can reduce, no one wants to make that decision, right? But those are the kind of discussions we've got to have.
While we were catching up with the congressman at GSL, one big topic of conversation was improving profit margins for cattle producers. Enter range cow nutritionist and extension specialist for West Central Extension and Research Center, Travis Mullenix. Travis was kind enough to share with us how researchers are working to develop the ranch of the future by using new technologies and practices with the goal of increasing profit margins for our producers. Just north of Highway 2, in a sleepy sliver of the Sandhills, lies the Gudmundsen Sandhills Laboratory. This location is the centerpiece of what is known as the Ranch of the Future. As input costs continue to rise for many beef producers, researchers are using new technologies here to construct the most state-of-the-art management systems.
With production agriculture, we've got tighter margins, increased cost of labor, increased feed cost, increased land cost. And there are output traits that we have, so say calf weaning weights, have not changed. And so our outputs are stabilized, but our inputs keeps going up. And so that's challenging to be profitable, and that's where one area we see technology coming in and playing is how can I decrease or manage these costs better? Well, another one is labor, finding skilled labor. And some of these technologies may not do away with labor, but they'll help with areas that we may be a little short in labor and help us make those decisions that used to require additional person.
From monitoring health and well-being to decreasing feed input costs, there are a plethora of new technologies that are being implemented at GSL that can assist ranchers in making better management decisions faster.
So there's a lot of new air tag technologies. There's new companies coming out with technologies looking at reproductive performance or indicators, calving events, looking at health statuses, etc. A lot of technology that we're looking at from an animal side is how can we use camera-based systems to get the body weight and body condition score of cows, and utilizing such technologies as a way to monitor conditions of my cows and make rapid proactive decision making from that. Some other technologies that we're looking at is some smart technology feeders, a feeding situation that I can deliver feed to each individual cow out on the pasture. Instead of feeding a whole herd of cows a certain rate of a supplement, can I individually feed those cows and decrease that variation in response? For the benefit of a producer standpoint, if I'm feeding cows on pasture, I have a high rate of variation of intake of that supplement. Even if I try to get, say, 2 pounds per day per animal, I'm going to have some 6 to 8 pounds eaters, and some cows are not eating anything. And so my performance result from that is going to be highly variable. And so how can I really combine that with some other technologies that say body weight and really be precise about my supplemental feed costs and what I'm supplementing to get an optimal performance response?
While drones aren't necessarily new tech when it comes to agriculture, GSL is currently cultivating new applications for drone use in the field to assist in management decisions.
We're seeing more and more use of drones in the industry, and one thing we want to look at with drones is forage quality and quantity. Can I fly that drone over a certain pasture and know how much forage quality and quantity there is, so I can make actually better decisions on, do I need to move those cows? What's the quality of that pasture? Do I need to change my supplementation, etc.? And so if we can utilize such technologies as a drone to give us a subjective measurement of what's there, we can make better decisions than a less subjective or a subjective measurement that is more of a guess.
While the upsides to these new tools are exciting, there are still barriers to making these kind of technologies readily available to producers nationwide.
A lot of challenges is cost. New technology comes out, there's high cost. Another is connectivity. Think about the landscapes that we utilize in the ranching community. We're usually in larger, extensive environments. Connectivity is one of being able to connect these technologies to a dashboard that actually can help you make decisions. And that's been the problem with a lot of technologies, is that they've been available, but they don't work in our situations because of where our cows at. In the dairy industry, they've utilized technologies for a long time due to the location of where their cows, being able to connect wirelessly to these technologies into a platform to get that data back in a way to make decisions. And so connectivity is another challenge that we're faced of making improvements in adoption of technologies.
As these new technologies may be in the hands of some producers in the near future, those who are hard at work building the ranch of the future are trying to ensure producers can hit the ground running if and when they choose to invest in these newer innovations.
Yeah, well, with technology, what we're looking at ways is how can we better manage our resources and optimize resource use across our landscapes? And doing that from a position of, can I do it from my desk? Can I get that data to my smartphone? And be able to make decisions quicker than I would beforehand. And so you think about beef production is, if I make one change, I may not see the results of that change for another 6, 8 to a year later. And so it's a long-term investment. And so some of these technologies will help get that data back quicker, that we see the benefit of that technology and the resulting increase in production or profitability, et cetera, that some of these technologies will give us.
As a centerpiece of the Ranch of the Future, the research conducted at Gudmundsen Sandhills Laboratory has brought together students and faculty in closer connection with farmers and ranchers to help them make some of the best long and short-term management decisions possible. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd. If you'd like more information on the Gudmundsen Sandhills Laboratory and their work there, we've included a link on the Market Journal website. Moving on now, and it's time to get a look at the markets. Wednesday of this week, I was joined by UNL livestock economist Elliot Dennis. We had a lot to discuss, including summer meat demand and projected Chinese exports, but we began by discussing the most recent cattle on feed reports and recent grain rally.
And there's really two things to remember of why the grain rally really took place in the first place. First has been kind of unprecedented buying from the Chinese and really the export markets in general. And the second has been a really low stocks to use ratio. Essentially, that's like our buffer throughout the year, and we were historically low on the stocks to use ratio. Then when USDA came out with their planning projections, essentially what happened was the market was expecting much higher planting rates on corn and soybeans than the USDA actually projected. And what that tends to do is raises the grain prices in the short run. That incentivizes producers or farmers to plant more corn. Right now we're going into the prime planting season for corn in Nebraska. And so what I would expect is that in the next planting report, USDA will come out and show that a lot of people more planting. And what we'll see is that the corn price is really high right now, but throughout the summer it will come back down. And I don't expect corn to be this high going forward. That being said, if we have continue to have potentially a drought that moves through, then we could see that price be elevated. But for all intents and purposes, it seems like this is pre-planting expectations. We're going to see more plantings, and then the corn price should come down.
We see a lot more placed cattle in the cattle on feed report on Friday. How is that going to impact processing?
Yeah, so I mean, processing is pretty tight right now, because we had a lot of front-end supplies with the expectation that people had the greater availability for the vaccine. States were starting to ease up on their quarantine and masking restrictions. And so what happened is the livestock feeders were placing cattle with that expectation. There's just a lot of animals on the market. If you've been watching anything on the exports, Chinese exports of beef are sky high. And so just a lot of pressure on that right now for animals to be harvested. One thing that we were expecting going into 2020 was that we're going to have tighter supplies, which means processing capacity wouldn't be as a constraining factor. But really what that's done is just shifted the herd contraction into 2021 and into 2022. So I would anticipate that processing capacity is going to be pretty tight for the next 3 to 4 months as we continue to work through the summer. Domestic demand is really, really strong for beef right now. And so there's going to be a lot of pull from the consumer side, both domestically and and internationally, to pull up cattle quickly, and that's going to really tighten processing.
So with the shifting markets, China's still rebuilding its hog herd. Recently, the USDA placed a possible projection of 10 million pounds of pork by 2030 to China. How does this impact our exports, imports, and our producers here locally?
Yeah, so China is obviously the big player in the pork market right now for two primary reasons. First, there's just a strong demand for pork products in China. There's a large taste preference for that. And second is, of course, we have African swine fever, commonly referred to as ASF. Those efforts to rebuild the sow herd has largely been successful. They still struggle a little bit with the piglets. PRRS is a big problem right now, and ASF is still problematic, but what we've seen is that as they've had success in rebuilding their sow herd, piglets and sow prices and pork products in general have started to come down in China, which has really lowered our exports. And when you look at 2021 exports for pork from the U.S. to China, it was all-time highs. And so what I see for pork products moving forward is that really China is going to play a major role, but as they build that herd, that demand is probably not going to be as strong as it was in the past. And so really it's looking to make sure we have as many markets we can ship our pork products to in general. Germany, for instance, also has issues with ASF. And so even though China may be going down, Germany is opening up now for pork products. And so I think it's a great time to be a pork producer. Pork cutouts are at pretty much extremely high. They're about $1.14, and so it's pretty incredible where we're at, and we have tightening supplies in the U.S., so very, very strong for pork producers, especially here in Nebraska.
And before we let you go today, do you have any marketing or risk management advice you'd like to share with our viewers?
Sure, yeah. Every time I'm on here, I always like to talk about risk management because I think, and if we're taking a long-term view on both our operations and our financial viability, risk management has to be a part of that conversation. The past couple years has really shown us that we don't know what the market's going to throw at us, and so risk management essentially mitigates a lot of that uncertainty. This year it's the grain rally with China and the low stocks-to-use ratio. Last year was COVID. The year before that was the flooding and the Holcomb fire. No one could have predicted all of those, but some basic risk management strategies can really help producers maintain a certain level of profitability. Two most common strategies is just take out a put option from CME, sets a floor on where the lowest price you're going to receive minus the premium that you pay for that, or just USDA's livestock risk protection program. The USDA has greatly subsidized that. Upwards about 45% of the premium is paid by USDA. So especially for producers who are tight on operating capital, risk management is almost a must to continue to operate in an increasingly volatile world.
Next week, we'll be joined by Scott Irwin, professor in the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Economics at the University of Illinois. So if you have a question you'd like for me to ask him, please email us or get in touch on social media, and I'll be sure to pass that question along. Next up, Nebraska is the tree planter state and home to Arbor Day. But tree planting preparations and strategies vary greatly across the state, mostly because of different soil types, topography, and precipitation from east to west. Nebraska Forest Service Northwest District Forester Doak Nickerson says that the semi-arid high plains and the Pine Ridge, where annual precipitation is normally 14 inches or less, tree planting soil preparations start a year in advance, with all efforts focused on preserving soil moisture and preventing wind erosion to increase survivability of new windbreak and tree plantings. You can learn more about the planting of trees in the high plains in the April issue of the Nebraska Farmer. And it's time now for weather with Nebraska Extension climatologist and Market Journal chief meteorologist Al Dutcher. However, Al is off this week, but we did have time before he left to give us an update on the current weather conditions related to the La Nina pattern.
Hello, everybody. I'm on vacation this week up in northern Michigan doing my annual pruning of the orchard, and like everybody else, this is the time of the year when we start to want to get in the fields and when I want to get out into the orchard and do things. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity, since we can't do a weekly weather forecast, to kind of give you an update on the current conditions in terms of the La Nina that was responsible for, in large part, the development of the drought last year and the continuation of it right now. More importantly, of course, with the La Nina event is what is the status of it, because double dip La Ninas usually come back to bite you pretty strong during the growing season, especially if it's the strength or close to the strength of the previous La Nina event. The good news is we've seen some radical changes over the last few months, and in association with those changes, we've also seen some changes in terms of the precipitation patterns, particularly across the Central Plains. So if we take a look at the La Nina status that was at its peak as we were into it toward the end of December, you'll notice that a very large cold anomaly over the equatorial Pacific. This is a classic La Nina signal. Now, as we look forward to the most current map that we have, which is from the 20th, we notice that that large signature has largely disappeared and is shrinking. Most of the contributing factors from it now are coming from the Gulf of Alaska low, bringing cold currents down to the equatorial Pacific, and we've shut off the flow from the Antarctic region, so most of this area is shifted much toward the north. We're also seeing the development of a warm pool in the eastern equatorial Pacific, and underneath of the ocean, there is no cold water all the way from Australia, basically all the way into the eastern equatorial Pacific, and it's all coming to the surface, so we'd expect this area to expand, and that does have some implications in terms of the forecast going forward. From a drought monitor perspective, there has been some significant reductions in drought in the Central Plains. A lot of this due to that very inclement period from about the middle of January all the way through the big storm that we had in March. Significant moisture, although we may be just a little bit stronger in terms of dryness across the panhandle in the southwest than is currently depicted. If we don't receive precipitation, we'll probably see this area rapidly intensify as we go into the warmer season. More importantly, looking at the precipitation patterns since the beginning of the year, you can notice that the anomaly for above normal moisture is centered right over in Nebraska and Kansas. We have actually seen pretty decent moisture. We are still carrying some deficits from last fall, particularly across the northeast and north central and portions of the panhandle, but overall a much better scenario than we were facing last fall. Now, as we go into the CPC's forecast for the precipitation for this summer, I'll draw your attention to this first map, which is essentially the next 3 months, May, June, and July. Biggest area of dryness to our northwest, lighter dryness to the southern plains, and as we go into the August, September, October period, you can see that they're shifting that up toward the northern plains and shrinking it. Right during the period of June, July, and August, this entire area moves over into the northern plains, into the central plains. My personal opinion is, based on the way the storm activity has been going recently, where we're seeing cutoff lows forming almost on a regular basis for every system that comes into either the Pacific Northwest or the northern plains, that we're likely to see this trend continue with the equatorial Pacific wide open, particularly in the east, and warmer pool underneath coming to the surface. We're going to see much more evaporation. That means that we'll probably see much more enhanced southern jet, and that's probably why you're seeing a lot of the southern plains, which we would expect to be drier than normal, showing up as climatological means, meaning big equal chances of receiving above normal, below normal, or normal precipitation. Additionally, the monsoon moisture in the southwest looks to be pretty prominent with that above normal moisture. That usually induces late summer thunderstorm activity across the central and southern plains. So I think we're going to see a much more promising forecast. The further north you go, the more uncertainty, of course, we have. So pay attention. These weather systems that move through the month of May are going to be very important at keeping the drought from the northern plains from expanding toward the southeast.
Thanks for that update, Al. Moving on, and every season, crop producers adjust their treatments and applications to try to generate better results than the year before. Now there's a new app producers can use to make analyzing these results more convenient. Market Journal's Maddie McIntosh spoke with Nebraska Extension educator Laura Thompson to learn more.
Nebraska Extension provides many tools and resources to help growers in the state. One tool many producers may already be familiar with is the Nebraska On-Farm Research Network.
So the Nebraska On-Farm Research Network is a program of Nebraska Extension that's sponsored by our Nebraska Corn Board, Corn Growers Association, Nebraska Soybean Board, and Dry Bean Commission. And our purpose is really to help farmers and agronomists across the state evaluate different production practices or different products that can impact their farm's productivity, profitability, and long-term sustainability. So Nebraska Extension works with farmers and agronomists across the state to help them conduct research experiments on their own farm on topics that are of interest to them and help them get information that's really relevant to their farming operation. Our goal with the Nebraska On-Farm Research Network is to not only help producers conduct research, but also provide them with tools and skills to be able to more confidently conduct research on their own. So one of the new tools that we've just released is the FarmStat app. And this is a tool that really allows producers to be able to analyze the data that they're generating from their own on-farm research experiments.
The FarmStat app allows producers to compare their own data in their fields. This is accomplished through a variety of features such as data importing, PDF exporting, and more.
So this is a web-based app. It's freely available, and producers can put in the data that they're collecting from their on-farm research experiments, whether that's yield, stand counts, maybe grain moisture, whatever they're interested in looking at. And it will generate then a statistical analysis that will help them understand the differences, whether they were maybe looking at 2 different products or 2 different production practices or even more than 2 different things, and help them understand if those differences are due to those treatments that they were evaluating or if it's just due to random variation in the field. So it really helps them sort out and have confidence in how the impact of those different treatments or products are in their field. So the data that they analyze is kept private for them. When they're done completing the analysis, there will be a PDF that's generated, so they can download this PDF that kind of has a nice summary of the results and keep that and have that as a conclusion. One of the features that I'm really excited about on the tool is that we provide a really straightforward conclusion statement. So interpreting statistical analysis and understanding what it means can be complicated, and so we wanted to remove any barriers and just make sure that we're providing a really straightforward bottom line statement. So all that statistical output is provided, but also at the end of the report it says, in very plain terms, this treatment that you tried resulted in statistically significantly higher yields, or it did not result in higher yields, and it's just very plainly spelled out at the bottom of that report.
The app is available for use in the web browser on both mobile and desktop devices. Laura says the data is completely private to the user unless they want to share the results. She also says there's plenty of resources available if you need help getting started.
We also have provided a lot of training resources. There's some nice videos getting you introduced to it, and then a manual to help you with any issues that you might have as you work through using the tool.
Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Maddie McIntosh.
To download the app, visit cropwatch.unl.edu/farmstat. We'll also post that link on the Market Journal Facebook page as well. And that's going to do it for this week's show. Remember, if you missed a story, be sure to download the Market Journal mobile app or follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. And don't forget, you can get the latest updates on the fight against coronavirus at covid19.unl.edu. We'll hope to see you right back here next time. I'm Bill Dodd. Thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.